Hey, good morning, people. This is Larry again, and we're gonna do contact report 69 between Semjase and Billy Meyer. Semjase of the Pleiadian Federation, in case you don't already know that. Corrections and improvements were made by Catherine Mossman and Joseph Darmanin. Man, these guys are trucking on this stuff. Translating it from, well, the DeepL translator translated it from German to English. And now these two go through and make sure it's correct. Okay, contact report 69, Friday, 10 December 1976 at 0041 in the morning. So almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Billy, you have not been heard from in a long time. Semjase, certainly. I was on ERA for 3 weeks. Billy, oh, so you could still take a few weeks off. Semjase, sure. Originally, she was planning on taking like 6 months off, but she got 3 weeks instead because a bunch of other stuff going on. Anyway, Billy, I am happy for you. May I bombard you with some questions? Semjase, just ask. Thank you. I have promised my friend Harold for a long time to ask you about the connections of Easter Island, which you certainly know. Because of the writing here, he wants to know whether you want to decipher it for us. Semjase, no, I am not allowed. Because of the writing here, he wants to know whether you want to decipher it for us. So there must be writing on Easter Island, some kind of alien writing. Semjase, no, I am not allowed to do that, for it would reveal connections that the Earth humans are not yet allowed to know. I myself could not even decipher these signs, for they are unknown to me, which is why I would have to pass them on. I will gladly do that for you, but then you would have to keep silent about the result. Billy, not necessary. I do not want to know either, because in and of myself I am already interested in it, but I would probably only burden myself with this knowledge. It is sometimes quite annoying to have to be constantly on my guard that I do not talk about something. But maybe you can reveal the secret of Easter Island to me. In particular, it is about the colossal heads, which are still a mystery to Earth humans today. Nobody knows how they came into being and who created them. May you say something about them? Semjase, sure, but I must remain silent about the messages left behind. If you yourself do not want to know for yourself, which you said earlier. But listen, the Earth human is misguided if she wants to make the concerns of Easter Island an isolated concern. The events of earlier times on this island are in direct connection with the country which you still call Tiahuanaco. Tiahuanaco, Tiahuanaco, Tiahuanaco today, as it was called already in earliest times, in spite of past repeated changes. Easter Island and Tiahuanaco are more than 5,000 kilometers apart, and yet they are directly related to each other. However, the history of the connection goes back to very early times and ended only 2,548 years ago, calculated back from today, which was 1976. In other words, 572 years before Emmanuel. As I once explained to you, the last decisive settlement of the Earth by extraterrestrial intelligences took place about 13,500 years ago. As you know, several of the immigrant horde became renegades, including a man in the rank of a half-Ishwish called Viracocha, Viracochoa, Viracochoa, who was already very old and extremely power-hungry. His name is still handed down on the Earth today, but with a small change, because for a long time now, he has only been called Viracocha, and also as Jiswich, although he was only in half the rank of such a person. He wasn't a full Jiswich, he was half the rank. Under his patronage and his cruel leadership, the highlands of Tiahuanaca at an altitude of about 4,000 meters were conquered, as was the Delta Island, which you call Easter Island. After this conquest, Viracocha settled with a special bodyguard of cherubim on the small island Mot, M-O-T, which is situated in front of Easter Island and which you call Matanui, or similar to my knowledge today. At that time, it was called Mot because the cherubim were animal-human life forms. In this case, they were all bird-like. Mot means bird in our original language, so the island was called the Mot Island, or also the Island of the Bird People, as it is still called today. So, Viracocha and Viracocha resided there. He and his followers, escaped Lyrians, like many others who came to the earth, were of gigantic physique, by earthly measure about 11 meters tall. All right. He and his followers were escaped Lyrians, like many others who came to the earth, were of gigantic physique, by earthly measure about 11 meters. That's about 33 feet tall. That's taller than most houses, whatever. Anyway, they were the ones who taught the dwarfish, normal-growing inhabitants of Tiahuanaco and Easter Island, who were procreations between the Earth humans and previously immigrated intelligences from the vastness of the universe, in many things, providing them with their own highly developed technology and teaching them how to operate the devices and machines. Thus, they also taught the natives of Tiahuanaco and Easter Island the work of stone masonry, and they let themselves be celebrated as gods. With the help of the giants and their machines and other equipment, the natives worked many meters large head formations out of the lava stone, placed these also with the help of machines randomly around the island. Similar events took place in the areas you call Pisco, Nazca, and Sacsayhuaman, because the same giants had settled there. Thus, many statues and other structures were created, whereby also the shape of the spaceships on Easter Island were reproduced from rocks of the lava walls, which have survived to this day, namely oval-shaped stones. Excuse me. Because the spaceships had this shape. After several centuries, the exact time is also veiled to us. The giants were attacked by a sudden epidemic that was unknown to them and cost the lives of many of them. Finding no cure for the epidemic, they fled Earth in their spaceships, set off into space, and have since disappeared. Despite the most eager investigations of our scientists, no trace of them has been found to this day. There is therefore the possibility that, despite their flight from Earth, they were attacked and killed by the mysterious plague in their spaceships, while their ships shot aimlessly through space, were attracted by some star and smashed into pieces. Our probability calculations very much favor this. Especially on Easter Island, the fleeing giants left behind a desperate people who were suddenly deprived of all technology because their giant gods had taken everything with them. So also several hundred unfinished head statues remained in the lava walls of the volcano craters in order to never be completed. In complete desperation, the islanders tried to retrieve their escaped gods by trying to complete the unfinished stone heads with primitive stone fist wedges, which of course failed miserably and was abandoned after a few years. Despite much research, we could not find out why the islanders believed that by completing the stone heads, they could bring back the giant gods. This is an unsolvable riddle for us. Since the completion of the stone heads failed miserably, the call came loud after some years that the putting on of bright red hats would calm the escaped giants and bring them back. But how and why this call came about is also a mystery to us. In any case, some crane-like machines and other primitive aids were used to build scaffolds and platforms on the many gigantic heads that already existed, after which large hats were poured onto the heads from a mixture of red earth, sand, and small stones. Some dozens of hats, whose original form is also a mystery to us, were made in a small volcanic crater, which, after their completion, were rolled to the heads and lifted up by the crane-like machines. According to our probability calculations, these hats must have been imitations of helmet-like structures of the giants, which we will probably not be able to prove. In general, many concerns about these giants and their activities on Earth at that time are mysterious to us, and we cannot find a solution for it. We only know that the giants left their last sign of life somewhere in a distant solar system of the constellation known to you as Andromeda. Where exactly we do not know, because there, somewhere on an inhabited world, they brought the knowledge of the existence of the Earth, after which, from there, thousands of years later, a large expedition started and reached the Earth. They were members of a human race of an average size of 180 centimeters, who brought a message from the giants of Tiahuanaco and lived there for 20 years and 7 months. This was calculated back from today, very exactly 2,568 years ago. We could clearly see that. During the nearly 21 years of stay of the Andromedans, unknown to us, they established a quite high culture, built electrical energy centers whose wiring they laid under the ground, protected by half-pipe channels created by them, over which your scientists still today break their heads, because they are not able to fathom their precision manufacture and do not grasp the purpose. Like the giants, the Andromedans, who were unable to adapt properly to the Earth's climate and atmosphere, were struck by the same mysterious plague after about 20 years, causing them to flee in panic. They too have since disappeared, and probably all have perished. This, dear friend, is in broad outline the story around Easter Island, Tiahuanaca, and some other regions. Unfortunately, I do not know more about it. Billy, girl, this is already much more than I expected. Actually, it is a pity that the dear giants have disappeared, because such journeymen we could use quite well on Earth today. Many a might-hungry lout would probably think several times more about it before they launch wars, if there were such giants here. Semjase, that would probably not be quite so. Billy, and why is that? Semjase, if you would see the stonehead formations created with their help, then you could understand it. The stone formations clearly show very sharp, narrow-lipped, and pinched mouth parts, unusually low forehead shapes, as well as extremely deep eyes. Billy, now all you have to do is say that unusually sharp, straight, and long noses are also part of it. Semjase, sure, these are the noses of those stone formations. Billy, ouch, then we miss nothing. I know this type of person very well. I am sorry that these journeymen are giants of all people, because they will give the horror story new fuel about the evil giants, although not all giant races are like that. Semjase, which you are right about. Billy, okay, but these giants, were they only in the places you mentioned, or were they or others in other places on the Earth? Semjase, this race stayed exclusively in the areas I mentioned. Further, other races of gigantic proportions populated all continents. Also, Cyclops and Titans, as well as dwarfs, settled on all continents. They came and went, or they passed away for whatever reason. Billy, aha! Were the gods and demigods of Greek mythology such settlers from space? Semjase. Sure, they were a splinter group of descendants of the Hyperboreans. Billy. Oh well, now I understand to some extent the connections. Good old Heracles said some very wondrous things, which just refer to it. But now I wonder how big these Hyperborean descendants must have been, because with Ascot I once had the opportunity to see something that will probably remain closed to the Earth human forever. And exactly according to what I saw, these Greek mythology gods or demigods must have been several meters tall. Heracles alone must have measured about 3 meters, right? Which is 9 feet. Semjase, sure. Billy, well then, it is also correct that Noah was around 3.1 meters tall, while Adam actually measured around 5 meters. Semjase, sure, only Adam was less than 5 meters tall. He was still a little more than a meter shorter than that measure. So Adam was about 4 meters, which is still 12 feet. Okay. Billy, you are pedantic. It really does not matter anymore. But now I am surprised how big Gilgamesh was. Actually, king and demigod? According to Sumerian tradition, he would have measured more than 7 meters if I used the big old cubit, and a cubit in parentheses, ancient unit of measure, equals to length of forearm / ulna, end parentheses. But according to the small cubit, it would have been only a little more than 3 meters. Which measurement is correct now? Can you tell me that? Sure. It is the big ulna, U-L-N-A, with which you have to measure. Well, then Gilgamesh was about 7.5 meters tall. Was that right? Semjase, that is correct, except for a few centimeters. Billy, you're driving me crazy. Why are you so pedantic today? Semjase, you want exact data. Billy, well, now, not that accurate. Semjase, then I misunderstood you. Billy, that is all right. Now it only makes me wonder why it is always claimed, even by you, that our ancestors and who knows how many great ancestors were normal people. Giants and titans, and I do not know what else can be called, at least not for our terms. Let me read that again. That is all right. Now it only makes me wonder why it is always claimed, even by you, that our ancestors and who knows how many great ancestors were normal people. Giants and titans, and I do not know what else can be called normal, at least not for our terms. Semjase, sure, but I had to get used to it first. All human races grow normally according to our terminology, but not according to yours. There may have been some misunderstandings, which I hereby clarify. Every human race grows normally in its type and only grows abnormally when Ausartungen appear in its own race. Billy, why did you not say that earlier? Semjase, you are mistaken because we have talked about different races of humans on several occasions, and I slowly began with the gradations according to earthly understanding. Billy, accepted. But how is it that Earth humans are so small today despite their giant ancestors? Semjase, it is primarily the mixing factors with the Earth originating human forms that are to blame for this. The crossbreeding genuses, as well as all the influences of the Earth itself, which is only able to carry smaller human beings. Through these influences of the Earth and all our own ancestors also changed in their size, because they were also giants in former times. In the course of the millennia, however, since they lived on Earth and became accustomed to it, they were subject to the alterational influences, so they become noticeably smaller in shape. Thus we, as late direct descendants of them, show the same average size as their terrestrial humans. There are exceptions, however, also with us, as you know, but also with you, whereby whole nations are affected by it. This is in addition to those breeds that have kept their original size since primeval times as dwarf or giant breeds. Billy, I understand. Unfortunately, however, with your current statement, you give the impression that you would have said different things about the same issues on previous occasions. But it is really just the impression or an impression, because I can well remember that you said practically the same thing, but mentioned fewer facts and connections. This could again lead some know-it-alls and critics to accuse you of contradiction. That should not be your concern. Semjase, that should not be your concern, because those who honestly strive to expand their knowledge will find the rationale of my explanation. Billy, you may be right, but we were talking about gods and demigods earlier. Now it makes me wonder how the names are chosen for them. Can you tell me anything about that? Last weekend I was informed about something very interesting in connection with your name. It became clear to me that your name corresponds exactly to your level of knowledge and therefore to your spiritual and consciousness-based evolution. Semjase. Throughout the universe, names for all life forms are selected exactly according to the respective evolutionary state of the life form in question, whereby... Sorry, I got distracted. We'll try that again. Semjase. Throughout the universe, names for all life forms are selected exactly according to the respective evolutionary state of the life form in question, whereby the human being on the earth unconsciously does not adhere very much to this rule of order, and particularly humans are given completely inappropriate names. The name given to a human being must correspond to the state of his or her knowledge and ability, and thus also to the corresponding level of evolution in fulfillment of the relevant rule of order. Otherwise, a disharmony arises in the material and consciousness-based area of life and causes confusion and wrong influences, as well as lets the human being go astray in their development. Take, for example, your name, which in its value means guardian of the treasure. So this value applies exactly to you, but so do all the values of the names that have been given to you so far and will come even further to you, of which there are many. Billy, I understand, but what about the name Phantom? Ask It once told me a lot about it. Semjase, a note here. Billy used to go by the name Phantom when he was out. He was actually a bounty hunter over in the Middle East for quite a while. And that's one of the reasons he's pretty handy with a pistol and not too worried about things. Anyway, Billy, but what about the name Phantom? Ask It once told me a lot about it. Semjase, sure, but you know that you should no longer use this name, which is also an additional name, only for a certain activity, namely for those that you exercised for years in various Eastern countries. Billy, great. I just wanted to hear that from you, because I really knew it myself. Semjase, sure. For certain reasons, you should not continue to bear this name, especially not in connection with that earlier activity, which was a hard apprenticeship for you. Billy, I know, but now please tell me another thing. Your name has a very specific meaning, which aims at you being a half Ishwish, or whatever it is called, right? Semjase, sure. Ishwish, however, is the male form. The female form is Ishrish, which is a queen of wisdom. Ishwish is the male form. Ishrish is the female form. While the half you call in our language is ELO. Billy, so you are an ELO, an Elo-ish-rish, if I understood correctly. And that is exactly what your name means or says, am I right? Semjase, sure, that is no secret. Billy, it also should not be. Semjase, Semjase, I would like to give you another explanation regarding the naming. The kind of Asartungen which appear when a person is given a false name is very easy for you to recognize with your friend Jacob. Billy, I have noticed that too. Not only that his name is completely foreign to me. Semjase, you see, his actions and thoughts will be overburdened by dangerous things, which are not his own, but which were caused by the wrong naming in him. But also the central star, in parentheses, influence of the galaxy central sun, in parentheses, and the planets play an important role for him, which these influences still promote when they approach him, which unfortunately is the case. Billy, unfortunately I do not know this very well, but I will talk about it with Martin. But I have often thought about Jacob and also found that his present name is completely wrong. But not simply because I know what one of his former names was in another personality, in another life. In my opinion and calculation, his name should actually be written and spoken with a C, and the end of the name with the letters US, which would then give the meaning protects God, or protects the wisdom king. But just as the name is written and pronounced in the German form, it means exactly the opposite, namely kills God or kills the king of wisdom. This is in contrast to the earthly human claim that the name Jacobus means harness holder, etc. Semjase, you have tried very hard and you have found the exact truth. Well, Billy, what about the abbreviation KOBI, K-O-B-I? I have not been able to find anything out so far. Semjase, you should not use the name for him anymore. It was good for the early days because he had a lot to learn, but now his full name should be used just as you calculated it, Jacobus. Billy, okay, thanks for the advice, but now something else, namely to do with the center of our galaxy. If I remember correctly, Askett once told me that this is about 50,000 light years away from our solar system, while our science claims that it is only 30,000 light years. What is true now? Semjase, the galaxy center, or the galaxy central sun, is at a distance of 57,000 light years if Sol is taken as the starting point. In other words, if our sun is taken as a starting point. Billy, aha. And what does this central sun consist of? I mean, of what matter? Semjase, on the one hand, these are wild particles, gases and electrons, etc., as well as different atoms, which means that the central sun, is the sun in its outer forms, is a seething galactic storm, still in disordered form. But in the center itself, it is a black hole, whereby the atoms, etc., constantly split and produce new connections, which separate in spiral forms from the outer central areas, and indeed in gigantic masses. These rotate around themselves in an enormous glowing, dividing themselves further in order to then form themselves into single gigantic clouds and spherical formations. So also develop themselves into sun formations, which develop in whole masses, in agglomerations. Billy, you mean there is never a sun alone? Semjase, they often develop in heaps, but not every structure of these species becomes a real sun, because many are too small in the mass to develop as such. Others become in the course of millions and billions of years, which is not rare, since their matter condenses to very compact formations, suns and planets, whereby the planets themselves will produce and one day carry life. However, the formation of planets does not stop there. It has to be said that the planetary formations that are developing capture many meteors, space matter of all kinds, and comets, and thus grow into large formations. Billy, by that you mean a process like it happened in our solar system with the solar systems Jupiter and Saturn. These planets are actually unsuccessful suns and are only now perhaps developing into real planets by attracting space matter of all kinds and thereby growing and becoming dense. Semjase, sure. Billy, okay, and how is such a galaxy center formed at all? Such a central sun from which a galaxy develops. I mean, Semjase, this is very simple, namely by the immeasurable agglomerations of neutrinos, particles, gases, and electrons drifting everywhere in space, as well as the different atoms, etc., which agglomerate, transform, and change, form new processes, heat up tremendously in the course of time, and thus condense and finally driven by the heat in the cold of space, which acts like a recoil, get into rotation and condense even more. Billy, I can understand that, even if I am not a physicist. These squibblers will deny your explanation anyway, because they always want to be smarter. But now a question about the universal central sun and the origin of the matter that is chasing through space. Where does it come from? What is it made of? And what actually is the universal central sun? One cannot see it from the Earth. Where is it? Semjase, these are many questions at once, but they are connected. The matter whirling through free space and the actual space matter are the direct condensed product of the central sun of the universe. This in turn is the origin of all growing fine material and coarse material matter, which in finer form also includes the gases as well as the electrons, neutrons, neutrinos, and all other elements, etc. The central sun of the universe itself does not correspond to the same substantive form as a central galaxy sun, but rather it still consists of pure spiritual matter or energy, which, however, already creates flake-like condensations, whereby, however, it still corresponds, as said, to pure spiritual nature, i.e., it still does not show any coarse material manifestations. This spiritual matter has a milky whitish color and is already visible to humans as light, because spiritual matter in this form is light. As with a coarse material galaxy, these spiritual energies also cluster together, form an immeasurable center, transform and condense into gases, electrons, and various atoms, and are ejected from the center in order to whirl through free space as primordial matter and space matter and other things, from which the visible and coarse material galaxies, etc., ultimately develop. The universal central sun itself is approximately in the middle of the universe, much too far away from the solar system for it to be observed by the naked eye, or even seen or even detected by the best technological means, despite the immense power of light. Only with very strong aids can it be seen outside the belt of matter, or the material universe, as a fine, milky, central band mass, which, however, is still very distant from earthly astronomical science. Thus, they have never succeeded in recognizing the central sun. As a band, The universal central galaxy is recognizable outside the material belt of the universe, but from any point because from any point outside the material universe, it is also seen sideways like your own galaxy, the Milky Way, as you call it. So, earthly astronomical science has never proved that the central sun or the central galaxy exists. From the Earth, the central galaxy does not appear like an immeasurable great lightning bolt, which continues to expand as it is claimed, whereby it is also assumed that this lightning bolt is equivalent to the Big Bang effect, which is nonsense, of course, because the noticeable lightning appearance has nothing to do with it. Because in reality, it is the flashing luminosity of the transformation belt through which the fine matter is formed into the coarse matter. A note here, fine matter, they call fine matter energy. They say coarse matter is actual, what we call matter, hard stuff. Okay, Billy, fantastic. But where does this spiritual matter or energy and these flakes of light come from? Or how you call them? Semjase, you are very illogical because you have the knowledge about it. Billy, of course. Because Genesis says it clearly and unambiguously. But I am not asking for myself, but for all those who do not yet possess this knowledge. Semjase, then your question is of justification. Billy, then I ask logically after all. Semjase, sure. Therefore, the flakes of light, as you just said, are pure condensed spirit energies starting from the creation, originating from its well-created ideas. Billy, beautifully put. But now explain what creation actually embodies in and of itself. I think that it is not a human or other material weapon or an individual ethereal being, but simply the universal consciousness. Semjase, with this you have already given the explanation. I cannot explain any more about it because our knowledge is limited in this respect as well. Creation is the same as universal consciousness, which directs, thinks, and rules in the being of consciousness as a double spiral egg formation, which at the same time forms the universe in its seven-belted growing extension, whereby the double spiral arms live, pulsating as spiritual energy and rotate against each other. Okay, I'm going to go back and do that paragraph again, because she's explaining what creation actually is. Creation is the same as universal consciousness, which directs, thinks, and rules in the being of consciousness as a double spiral egg formation, which at the same time forms the universe in its seven-belted growing extension, whereby the double spiral arms live, pulsating as spiritual energy and rotate against each other. We do not have more knowledge about creation itself. Like you, we only know the causes and the effects, the existence, and the laws and recommendations, but nothing more. Billy, I should not have asked you about it. You seem to be somber now. Semjase, your question once again made it very clear to me how little we know despite our enormous knowledge. Billy, do not be dejected about it. Maybe you know about my next question, in quotes, in parentheses, a private matter. Semjase, in this science, the human beings of the earth are still very ignorant. Billy, you do not answer my question. Semjase, it is also very illogical. I do not understand what you actually want to ask. Billy, unfortunately, the question does not come from me, and I only always understand the main meaning. Just answer the question the way I put it. If something else is meant, then the questioner already answers and complains. Semjase, in parentheses, private matter / answer ... Billy, thank you. We will see whether that reply is what was meant. But now, something very important. Please ask Ptah if he can call me next time, because I have something very important to ask, which only he can answer for me. Semjase, if you think that I cannot answer you ... Billy, certainly not. Not only your father can know. Semjase, then I will ask father. Billy, thank you, because it is very important to me. But now I have another question about the giants in former times. In different places of our earth have been found petrified footprints of humans of, believe it or not, 90-centimeter length. How big were these people? So he's saying the footprints were 90 centimeters, which almost a meter, I guess. 90 centimeters should be 0.9 meters. How big were these people? Semjase, on average, about 6 meters to 6.5 meters. So we're talking 18 to 25 feet, somewhere around there. Billy, aha, that is how I reckoned it. I just multiplied the foot length by the average size of today's human being and came to 5.95 meters. So I did not miss much. Can I usually use this calculation for such comparisons? Is it approximately correct? Semjase, sure, it is even pretty accurate. That you came to the lower result is only because the petrified footprints of these giants came from people who had not yet grown up. So they are a bit smaller. I know that because I know what your thought processes are. Billy, well, then the case is clarified. I do not want to know anymore. Semjase, then I now have to give you my best regards from Quetzal and all the others. Also, your group members should be greeted very warmly. Billy, thank you. They will be happy. When are you coming back? Semjase, only in the middle of May of next year. Billy, that is how long I want to go on holiday. But I just remembered something. Recently I was told that one evening, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, a triangular and radiant ship hung almost vertically high above our house for about 20 minutes. This was told to me by an innkeeper who wanted to have the object observed. It is interesting to note that exactly at this time in our house, different people began to rotate, and I finally ran away because everything became too much for me. Began to rotate. In our house, different people began to rotate, and I finally ran away because everything became too much for me. I thought about it and came across all sorts of things. Do you have any idea what kind of ship it might have been? You know, it must have looked like a delta with bright rays of light at the front and colorful play of light rays at the back. Semjase, you say delta-shaped? That can only have been Giza intelligences who let their influence play. Billy, that is exactly what I was thinking and explaining to the others. I do not know any other ships of this kind. What do these twerps want again? Semjase, surely they used our absence to become active again. I will pass on this message so that peace is offered again, because we cannot use these powers in the game. It is enough for the rest, because great intrigues are going on. It is stupid because right now we would have more important things to do than to take care of these troublemakers. In any case, be very careful and do not dispense with your protection. In other words, stay armed. Billy, yes, we are better provided for now too, because as you said at the time, we got these means of distance communication. In other words, our friends who were always very caring arranged everything and got things moving. So he's got walkie-talkies now too, or CBs or whatever they want to call them. Semjase, pay them my sincere thanks for that. Billy, I am sure they will be very happy. They are also really very loving and concerned. Semjase, I am very grateful to them. But how does it go now with you in your closest circle? Unfortunately, I could not devote myself to these things in the weeks of absence and not let my impulses penetrate. Surely you have suffered bad anger with your wife again as a result. Billy, as exactly you know, it really was like that. Semjase, it was a great need for me to try again immediately after my return. Billy, I noticed that because when you came back, my wife suddenly changed again for the better. Semjase, I felt that. Unfortunately, she is constantly attacked by negative forces, which are very strongly directed at her. When I let my impulses penetrate her, I often feel a very strong defense. But hopefully it will get better because in the long run we should win. The change that has already taken place also influences everyone else to get closer to your wife, despite her constant, very negative relapses. Besides, Mara and Martin form a well-founded basis for the better, even if they are often hostile and jealousy. Billy, which unfortunately you are right about, but I guess everything will still be okay after all. I am always hopeful and I have patience. Semjase, sure, you should just expect less, because everything needs its time, but especially such things. If you create too high hopes, then you fall all the deeper when these are destroyed again, because they are only partially fulfilled. Because despite your help and love, she is quite negative towards you and your mission, even if she says otherwise. Billy, I know, but that is what always pulls me up, you know. I just cannot and do not like to give up. Talking about his wife Calliope, I believe. Semjase, sure, but nevertheless you should keep your hopes within reasonable limits, which you can do very well if you do not weave your feelings into it so much. Billy, okay, I often hear the same thing from the other side. I will try to follow that. Semjase, you do well by it. Billy, okay, I will go with that. I have already said that. You know I have other worries. Amada also worries me, but I would like to talk about it elsewhere, because it seems that she is confused. Semjase, there will probably not be enough time for that today. If it is all right with you, I will come back in a few hours or in a day or two to discuss these things. To discuss things then. Billy, it would be fine for me. However, if I do not have to write a report about it, if you thus would not tell me anything. If you thus would not tell me anything. Semjase, sure, I can meet your wish. He doesn't want to write it in a contact report for some reason. Billy, thank you, but now another question. A few days ago, something happened in Ooster concerning a former SS chief. Are there any connections between ... Semjase, no, do not worry. The event is known to me, but it has no connection with us or you. Billy, it would have also surprised me. But now another question. Wednesday morning, you sent me out at 0023, in other words, like just after midnight, to look at something that had gone down at a certain place. 3 of us found a track in the snow in a clearing in the woods, which obviously had to come from a ship. The snow had melted within a radius of about 3.5 meters, with 4 points outside the circle pointing to landing supports or something similar. To our astonishment, we also found a lot of small footprints, not more than 23 centimeters long, leading from the ship's tracks to a small pond, back to the ship's tracks, and then to another water pond, where the same small footprints then also led into the forest and back again to the ship's tracks. The craziest thing, however, was that we found 2 such footprints in the middle of the snow, about 100 meters away from the ship's track, without another trail leading there. It just seemed as if someone had flown through the air and only stepped onto the snow quickly for 2 steps. Semjase, you observed very well. We found out the same thing through a telemeter ship. Talking about her recorders or her autonomous drones, telemeter ship. Billy, yes, we thought that was fantastic, but what happened there? Can you tell me more about it? Semjase, sure, we could locate the life forms and get in touch with them. These visitors are very small people, only 110 centimeters tall. They inhabit a small planetary world in a galaxy that was previously unknown to us. They came to Earth by an involuntary time shift by a faulty manipulation of their still insufficient space technology. In other words, they haven't got it dialed in yet. Equipped as an expedition ship, it is commanded by scientists, one of whom went out of the ship to fetch plants, ice, and water from the water points you mentioned to analyze them, while another went into the forest to collect material there as well. Meanwhile, a third one, moving with a hovering device, secured the surroundings to be safe from unforeseen surprises. Due to an accident, however, he once hovered too close above the ground, leaving the 2 footprints you had found. Billy, oh, that is how it is. But where are these dwarves now? Can they even go back to their homeland? You said that they came here because of a time difference, just because of an unwanted one. That does mean that they have been thrown out of their own time, right? Semjase, sure, but they will find their homeland again because Father brings them back to their time and to their homeworld through a leap in time. But this still offers some difficulties because we still have no information about their home galaxy, which is why we first have to work out the coordinates. Billy, do you think you will find them? Semjase, sure, even if it will take some effort. Billy, then good luck. But tell me, why and at what time did these dwarves land in that forest? Semjase, they landed there because a small impulse transmitter of ours is installed very close to that place, which serves as orientation for our telemeter ships. They registered these impulses and subsequently descended there. The time of their landing was 2140 hours, in other words, 9:40 in the evening, from Tuesday to Wednesday. Billy, so that would have been on, wait a minute, yes, on the 7th of December. Semjase, sure. Billy, well, we already wondered about these dwarves. We even thought that children might have been floating around, but the tracks to the water ponds and the individual tracks in the snow spoke against it. I also calculated on the basis of the footprint size that they must have been creatures of about 120 centimeters, which is why we could not exclude children from our assumptions. 120 centimeters, I believe that's 1.2 meters, which is pretty short, about 3.5 feet, something like that. Semjase, you calculated very well. There is only a difference of 10 centimeters. Billy, that may be, but I think I have to go. My friends are waiting by the cars, and I am sure they are freezing pretty badly. Semjase, then go back. I will call you again. Shall I send you today's report? Billy, gladly, yes. Now take care, girl. Only 2-3 more questions under exclusion of the public, which you would please also answer for me like this, ... So he's got 3 more questions, but he doesn't want them to get into the contact report, so they got to do it separate. That was contact report 69, talking about Easter Island and talking about giants and dwarves and all kinds of stuff. That's about it for this one, and I'll see you again on contact report 70. Again, thanks very much for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.